It's my very great pleasure to introduce you to Onwurah, the British Member of Parliament representing Newcastle on Tyne Central, and also the Shadow Minister of Science, Research and Innovation. She is a chartered engineer with a degree in electrical engineering from Imperial College London, and an MBA from Manchester Business School. She was elected to Parliament in May 2010, and prior to her parliamentary career, she has a very distinguished career working as an engineer in the telecom sector for over 20 years, including as head of telecom technology at the UK regulator Ofcom. Her broad experience also includes being a partner at Hamilton Ventures, a US technology consultancy, developing GSM markets in Nigeria and South Africa. She also served as Director of Product Strategy at GTS. She is a presidency member of the Party of European Socialists and a fellow at the Institution of Engineering and Technology. She is also a fellow at the City and Guilds of London Institute. She's an honorary fellow of the British Science Association. She's a very strong advocate for women in STEM. I'll just say that while I was preparing for this session, I watched a number of interviews with Chi, and one quote really stood out to me. While speaking with Churchill College, Cambridge, about the underrepresentation of women in science, she said, "As an engineer or scientist, you wake up every day with something new or exciting to achieve. You figure out how the world works, and then you make it work better." I think that's a very powerful statement, and it's also a sentiment deeply aligned with the motivations of the decentralized science community. Whatever our backgrounds, I believe that we are all here today due to our desire to make the world better through science, and indeed to make the system of science itself work better too. With that, please join me in welcoming Onwurah.
Wow, thank you very much, Isabel. That was a fantastic introduction. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to live up to it, particularly as I am a politician now, as well as an engineer. I always say I'm still the engineer in the house, as it were. And it's a real pleasure to be here. This is the first time in the Quick Institute since it was a building site. I had a tour when it was being built, and it's a beautiful building, and it's a great pleasure to be here for this conference as the Shadow Minister for Science and Research. And I am going to take advantage of this opportunity that the organisation has given me to outline the Labour Party's plans, priorities for science and research, and hope discuss the sector's challenges and opportunities, particularly around how to connect academia and industry. But first, I do want to talk briefly about why I'm here today. Now, I was initially approached by Alfie over there, it's his fault, who is a co-founder of DESI, and who was a fantastic advocate for decentralized science, or this, representing it as a groundbreaking effort within the scientific community to use 21st century digital tools to change how research is funded and how knowledge is shared. And Alfie also told me that Professor Victor Kowalczuk of Newcastle University, who I don't think is in the room at the moment, but he's based in my constituency, and he was one of the first or the earliest recipients of a grant through the blockchain-based research funder VitaDAO, and he received nearly $300,000 for a project focused on discovering novel autophagy activators. And Victor believes that the key difference compared to traditional funding is that with DeSci, he is part of a community, a group where he can have a conversation about how to develop his project in the most promising and mutually beneficial direction. And he also emphasized that the timescales involved were much shorter than other industrial collaborations he has had with Big Pharma, for example, which have taken years. In this case, the conversations took place over the course of 2 weeks. Quite stunning, really, and he had a deal after just 4 weeks, which is relatively unheard of, I think, in other funding means. So stepping back for a moment, I think we can all agree, and I certainly would say that there are challenges with the current system of scientific research funding and publication. Now, I'm going to talk about Labour's priorities and our plans to address some of them, but at a sort of high level, there are very legitimate concerns with regard to what you can call the gatekeepers of science, that these in terms of funding and in terms of publication, that these gatekeepers are too narrow a group, that they are effectively, though not intentionally, acting as a drag on innovative thinking, and the emergence of diverse talent, diverse in gender, class, but also geographic location, ethnicity, etc. But at the same time, I do want to say that we've learned painfully, the need for quality control in terms of the accuracy of information being made available to the public in all fields. And the issues of expertise in science and the challenge of making sure highly specialized and complex research is legitimate are such that I don't think anyone is questioning the need for gatekeepers. So I'm really here, today to learn about how the DeSci community thinks about these common challenges and what roles distributed databases and distributed ledgers can play in fostering innovative, inclusive, and rigorous science. I mean, as an electrical engineer and a software engineer, spent a lot of time working with, on, and around databases and distributed architectures. So I'm sure it'll also come as no surprise to you that I am particularly interested in the opportunity to foster diverse funding and talent emergence. Again, as an engineer, I worked in tech all over the world. I know just how much talent there is out there that isn't recognized or isn't getting the opportunities it deserves. So I'd like to see the scientific method applied here. I'd like to see documented, peer-reviewed, and replicable examples of the impact DeSci can have, as well as a definition of terms. For example, to say that blockchain is always available and accessible, which is something that was common to say, has been rather undermined by recent examples in cryptocurrency. So, what kind of regulatory requirements are there, and are they less burdensome than the current checks and balances which are part of the funding journey? And at a time when the public are told, we're being told we have to show restraint, the failures of due diligence from this government, and I'm a politician, this is not so much a political point, it's a public accountability point in terms of having wasted billions of pounds of taxpayers' money. And the public procurement VIP lane for Friends of Tories ministers. We believe, as hopefully the next government, that public funding absolutely has to be accountable. And that's why I'm really keen to hear how this space can develop, contribute to Labour's science offering, as we begin the long build-up to a general election. So let me just say a few words about what else Labour believes in. We believe that the United Kingdom is and has long been a world leader in science, from the discovery of gravity to the invention of the steam engine in Newcastle, by the way, well, a commercial one. Britain has a long and proud scientific heritage, and we have a world-beating science base. We rank third only behind the US and China in science and technology journal articles. And as well as pushing the boundaries of humanity's collective understandings, science for science sake is a public good, but it also represents a priceless platform for the UK's future growth and prosperity. But due to government lack of investment, due to the absence of a long-term industrial strategy, we don't turn our science base into high-skill, high-wage, high-productivity economy across our country that we need. Our great UK science startups are being bought up or moving abroad because of a lack of UK investment opportunities. And one of the biggest threats to UK science right now is our difficulties with the association to Horizon Europe. That was a Conservative manifesto promise. Ministers promised it 23 times in the House that we would associate, yet years later, we have still uncertainty and we don't have association or a plan B alternative. And that leaves investors, scientists, researchers and universities in limbo. And many British scientists are still having, they come to talk to me about, having to choose between the country they love and the funding they need. So that's why our position on Horizon is clear. No alternative to Horizon can have the efficiency, effectiveness, influence, prestige, or range of Horizon. Labour would secure association to Horizon to keep the UK as a world leader in science. And by associating, we would foster and grow the international collaboration that scientific research absolutely depends on. And our association would support universities to keep the best scientists and researchers here in the UK. Now, and another key area that we believe in is the need to diversify our science sector. It's not a tick box, diversity mustn't be a tick box exercise. It's an economic imperative. Without it, innovation is stifled, valuable talent and skills are excluded from the workforce. And as Keir Starmer said, we draw our strength as a country from too few places. And nowhere is that more evident, I would say, than in STEM. 65% of our country's STEM workforce are white and male. Data from nature.com has shown that female researchers, and in particular early career researchers, have faced a decline in scientific publishing output since the pandemic. And the British Educational Research Association says that early career researcher insecurity is impacting the mental health of our researchers, with women and minorities, as always, in fact, impacted most. So we have to value and support our early career researchers, address the issues of insecurity and precarity that are the future of science. And there are other aspects of diversity which are inhibiting innovation. So science and R&D funding is very much concentrated in the Golden Triangle. Here we are in it. And that's the Greater Southeast, which receives more public funding for R&D than the entire rest of the UK combined. Now, I was at Oxford on Friday, and it's a fantastic ecosystem there for scientific research and funding. What I'm saying is not that we want to take away from that at all. We want to build on that. We want to grow that, and we want to help use that to drive innovation across the country. Our regions need to share the growth, prosperity, and opportunity science can provide, and also the high-paid, high-skilled science jobs that go with it. So a Labour government would aim for 3% of GDP to be invested in R&D, to stoke the engine of high-skilled growth, to access new and diverse talent pools, and to catalyse regions which have been left out of scientific investment. We've recently published our startup review, which was chaired by Lord Jim O'Neill, and that's got a number of practical solutions to issues experienced by startups and spin-outs, around patient capital, skills, structures, and incentives. And I'm also looking very closely at how we can, in terms of our science offer, Labour science offer, how we can better support and incentivize universities and clusters of universities to drive engines of regional growth, working with local businesses to deliver regional economic prosperity. So that's like a really top level summary of our vision for science, research and innovation. I'm looking forward to the conversation with Isabel and to learning more about the contribution that decentralized science can make within that vision. We just, to end on a very positive note, we believe the UK has huge potential for new industries sparked by investing in science and research and development, whether that be in the life sciences, in AI, and in semiconductors and material science. And that holds the potential to rebalance our economy and spread wealth and opportunities. Isabel talked about how making the world work better. And with our world-leading research base and universities, a skilled workforce, and our deep capital markets, the UK is well placed to create new clusters of capabilities where no region will be left behind. So working in partnership with business, civil society, academia and trade unions, Labour will grab hold of the national prosperity that Britain is capable of and build a fairer and a greener future. Thank you very much. Yes, that's okay, yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I think I'm just very pleased and excited to have someone here who, has influenced a completely different space from where many people here do. And this is going to be part of the ongoing dialogue. And I think decentralized science, especially with a focus on the potential for building public goods, business models for public goods infrastructure, is a very good fit with things that should be and are aligned aims with actually all government, largely, perhaps particularly with Labour government. My first question is, I wanted to talk a little bit about your pre-parliamentary career. You spent 2 decades as a professional engineer, and I wondered if you could tell us a bit about that and perhaps how that shaped your perspective on the science and innovation sector.
Well, I could talk about that for hours. I'll try and be brief. I mean, I went into engineering, as I always say, because it was fascinated. I was fascinated. Actually, I wanted to build spaceships. I didn't actually do that, but I think there's time after my political career. But I was just fascinated by making things work and making things work better. And the driver, science and engineering is a driver of progress, of human progress, making life easier, bringing us all together. I did my degree in Imperial, and then I went into working for the telecommunications sector, working for a Canadian-American telecoms company called Nortel, and I was about designing communication systems from big switches, which serve cities, to little exchanges, which serve small businesses. And so I saw as part of that, I think my career, and I worked in the UK, I worked in France, I worked in the US, I worked in Nigeria, I worked in Denmark and Singapore. I really saw the transformation that that was an emerging sector. It went from being, let's say, in fact, it went in multiple stages, including mobile phones, say, and the internet, from being a bit of a wild west to being, telecoms now is one of the most heavily regulated sectors, and we see through the online safety bill going through Parliament now, the internet is beginning to be regulated. And I think just in terms of how that influences my perspective in my politics, I think it's a great question. I haven't really thought about it coherently before, so let me try and be coherent. There's 3 or 4 ways. Firstly, the sort of the scientific method, if you like. I talked about proving things, using evidence to prove things. I don't know whether this is spilling any secrets, but that doesn't always happen in politics. So that is that value, that kind of thought process is, I think, really important to me in my political career. And I think it's increasingly important when we've seen the rise of scientific advisors, chief scientific officers, etc. We saw in the pandemic the importance of having scientists giving advice, but not allowing politicians to sort of lean on science for bad policy decisions. So there's that. Then there's also seeing the contribution that technology gets cheaper. Cost a lot to make those fundamental breakthroughs, but their implications, their uses, get cheaper and more ubiquitous. I mean, the mobile phones we use came from defense research, if you like, originally in World War II. So that idea that technology gets cheaper and more ubiquitous, but also, and I'll stop here. Also, that regulation in governments, it's not just about getting out of the way. Government does, this government does need to have technology. I always say technology is not something that's imposed on us. It is something that is a consequence of the choices we make, politically and economically. And we do need to see the kind of future that we want if we're to help it come into being. And we need to make strategic choices. And that's why Labour's industrial policies around emissions, and those emissions, just for example, one of them is clean energy by 2030.
Thanks for that. I found one quote that I believe you said, which was that when you entered Parliament, it was a culture shock, but that also it was perhaps the most diverse place that you worked.
That's absolutely true. Actually, working with the Labour Party now, half of our MPs are women. I'm coming from 20 years in tech or engineering, working with women Wow. That's great, you know, that sense of solidarity, sisterly solidarity has been, you know, fantastic.
One question I'd like to ask is a sort of more general question about how you would like to see the science and innovation sector support the UK's broader economic and social goals. You mentioned green energy, but there may be other economic and social goals that you think science or innovation could particularly contribute to.
Well, that's a great question. And can I just sort of say also as well, it's great that you're asking that question, because I think there are sort of, how can I put this, groups within the scientific community over history, which think that the benefits of pure science, scientific research for its own sake, mean that we should not be we shouldn't be considering the implications of scientific research and the direction of science. And science does have a direction, and for me it's incredibly important. As Keir Starmer said, that we diversify those involved in the development and production of science, because science cannot reflect the aims and ambitions of humanity if it doesn't reflect humanity. And that's in terms, I think that's in terms of gender. It's also in terms of ethnicity, disability, all the protected characteristics, but also in terms of whether you call it the north-south or divide as well. So I think we really what in terms of how science can contribute, by diversifying the science and the science that's different. But more specifically, we cannot address climate change is the existential challenge that we face. It's the planet and it's humanity, and we cannot address it without significant scientific developments and breakthroughs. And I was just, for example, looking at the figures for the cost per gigawatt of solar panel generate energy have gone from £145 to 15 pence or something. That is scientific progress in many areas, material sciences, whatever, and those contributions. And then we have, I would say also health. We have such health differences. In Newcastle, there's I think 12 years difference, depending on what sort of metro stop you're born next to, and the disparities across the country are huge. The science has a huge role to play in addressing that. And then I'll just say finally, empowering people. So this idea that science is something that happens to people, one of the reasons I'm interested in, one of the many reasons I'm interested in decentralized science is the contribution to empowering people as to feel that I talk about innovation nation, which means that everyone thinks that science is for them, but also that they have a say and an involvement in science and the benefits that it brings.
That's a really interesting lens. I think we think quite a lot here about the opportunity for bottom-up empowerment of people in the decentralized science community, not only early career researchers who often are less empowered than they perhaps deserve to be, but of course things like patient groups as well. And if you can create organizational structures that are more open and that allow people to permeate through, then the hope is, of course, that we can attract more people from underrepresented groups.
Yes.
I like the idea of really leading on the empowerment angle, and not science not being something that just happens.
Not something that happens to people, and not being something that happens to Ivy Tower, is something that we are all part of. And just having worked in IT as well as an engineer, in development and stuff, the only way to affect cultural change, beneficial cultural change with technology, is when the users are part of the process. And we are trying to do that with science.
2 minutes. I have so many questions that I could want to ask. Can I have 5? I suspect that, and this may not be your area, so that's okay, but I suspect a lot of people here are wondering about regulation. And so I was thinking, crypto has not covered itself in glory in the last year, even fundamental technology sitting behind crypto. demands around building public goods infrastructure, open source, huge open source community. So of course it's not a single thing when it comes to regulation. And I'm wondering, UK has a burgeoning DeSci ecosystem building on the UK scientific institutions, as you mentioned, also the fintech and blockchain expertise. However, many consider the regulatory uncertainty around blockchain is holding the sector back. And I wondered, do you have a view on how regulation should evolve to enable positive innovation in the sector?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, and I'm not certainly not here to set out, a full regulatory also, I would say though that I think that when it comes to fintech, we've had quite a, not here to praise the government, but there has been quite a lot of innovative discussion, consultation, sandboxing, or whatever they call it, about developing regulation around fintech. And I think, the most, having worked for a regulator, Ofcom, in the technology space for a number of years, most important thing is to recognise for innovators and your scientists like yourselves who are in this room, or the funders, to recognise that regulation, can empower innovation. It can also empower competition, because often the absence of regulation, especially when regulation delivers trust, it's the big names that already have the trust or the recognition. So proper regulation that enables people to feel secure and safe in using new technology or new instruments, new financial instruments, is a really important way of establishing a strong market, a strong trusted market in those new instruments. I think it's really important that regulation is forward-looking and that it puts, innovation and consumer benefits, consumer security, sort of at the forefront. And so I don't like to hear this discussion that says it's either innovation or regulation. Often it's regulation and power innovation. I think there is an issue in the capacity of government regulators right now. I think that people have been taken out of many departments. Many departments have been cut. And I know that in the life sciences sector, there was an issue with the capacity of the regulators, some of the regulators, to respond quickly, and so that that needs to be addressed.
That's a very positive and optimistic lens. Do you think we have time for a question?
I mean, it's technically lunchtime, like 8 minutes ago, but I think let's go for it unless.
If anyone has any burning questions, this hand went up very quickly.
Can I pass you the box?
Ooh. This is
we're all missing legs. You can throw it.
You can throw it. Wow. Oh, well thought.
Hello.
That's innovation for you.
Hi, great discussion as well, by the way, thank you. Yeah, so I know we talked a lot about the kind of systems and sector-wide approach in improving science, research and innovation, but to what extent do you think a more granular approach is necessary? For example, at the institutional level, there's a lot of problems, gender inequality, publish or perish, bullying and harassment, things that are obviously slowing down and discouraging people from participating in science. So yeah, I was just curious what kind of approach do you think is relevant there?
Okay, so great question, and yeah, and I think I've spent 20 years in technology, but spent so much time as the only woman in a room and hearing discussions which were exclusionary and sometimes often biased, whatever. Now, I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's absolutely, you cannot build change if you just from the top down, but it is really important. It is really important that the message and the culture and the ambition is set at the top, and that's why it's important to take. I think it's important to take a systems approach. But equally, change is built, from the bottom up and from the middle out. And so that's why it's really important that institutions at a government level, at a regional level, universities. I always say that I can walk into a university engineering department and tell within about 30 seconds if diversity is a tick box exercise or is actually something that is meaningful. And that combination of setting the agenda at the top and measuring the data and the success and the involvement of for example, early career researchers. I think it has to be that way. And if you have suggestions as to what you would like to see change, then I'm really happy to hear them.
Not today, but yeah, I'll have a think.
I think we unfortunately should stop there because I don't really want to but I think we could all listen to you so much longer. So thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you for coming down today.
Thank you.